on including myself that would be a PTAC member, so I think we can go ahead and get started.
Yes, that looks good. I'll keep my eye out. I have not seen this person join yet. We do have a new member who got appointed between last meeting and this one by the mayor. So I would like to introduce that person, but I don't see them join the meeting just yet.
Agreed. I do not see them on the meeting either. So I apologize. I can't remember your name. Could you go through rules of engagement for Zoom calls and roll call, please?
Yes, I can. Good evening. My name is Andrea Lynch, Transit Planner 1, Lawrence Transit. Here with me is Adam Weigel, Transit and Parking Manager. He will work alongside Mike Wazakowski to facilitate the meeting proceedings. This meeting is being recorded and broadcast on the city's YouTube channel and public access cable channel 25. During the meeting, when you are not participating, please mute yourself by clicking on the microphone icon found on the lower left-hand side of the Zoom menu. In some cases, we may mute or unmute people as needed to minimize distractions during the meeting. Please remember to state your name and title for the benefit of those listening remotely. If you are participating by phone, you can click *6 to unmute your phone. And now I will do roll call. Lance Fay.
Here.
Max Schieber.
Here.
Mike Wazakowski.
Here.
Alan Ackland.
Here.
Gregory Critchlow. Phil Wilson.
Here.
August Rudisell.
Do not see August on the line right now.
Freddie Gipp.
Here.
And as our new member joined.
I don't believe so.
I do not see their name either.
Okay.
We're still at 6 people though, so that does constitute a quorum. Committee members, thank you for making time today to be available. With the order called, first item on the agenda then is public comment. I do see we have a letter from Patricia Sinclair. Patricia, would you like to speak to us at this time?
Yes, Mike, I didn't know how I'm supposed to do the voice public comment.
That's perfectly fine. You have our general rule, I think, is 3 minutes, but I mean, if you're the only person providing public comment, we can give you a little bit more leeway.
Because I didn't prepare a written 3-minute thing. Okay, I have to go. Okay. I just have to juggle my phone and get to the place where I had that. So I'm not going away. I'm just going to the place where I have a copy of it here. Okay. Here. I was promised a copy of the final proposed plan of June. I said 6th, but it's the 7th, by Adam Weigel, but he didn't send it. And then a quote from him from an email he sent to me saying, "We can get you a printed copy once that is available," but I never got it. This follows many attempts by me to get printed copies of proposed routes, all unsuccessful. Without these, I cannot see what routes are relevant to me, and plan and comment accordingly. I asked that they be delivered to me since I hadn't been able to get them in the manner told to me by Emily. Then I asked that they be mailed to me as I would pay costs involved. Finally, I went to the library on June 11th in the heat, but found I couldn't print the 125-page report. The link to open this report on the agenda was broken. It took me to an iCompass site where I needed a password to get in. I finally found a way to get in, but I couldn't do much then as I needed to leave to catch a bus, which only runs once an hour to the Merc. I used the lift on my bus when leaving the Merc. This never worked well when used on 9th Street stop. Who inspected that stop, with what qualifications, and determined that it will work well for the lift in that narrow grass space? And do they plan to move the shelter there? I've been treated in a dismissive and patronizing manner by Adam, who reassured me that they would help me figure out my routes after they were implemented in January. The point of commenting ahead of changes is to know the situation and advocate before final changes are made. Key questions such as the situation with the transfer station downtown went unanswered. We did not have a phone conversation. My written comments have not been read or addressed by PTAC for the April 11th or May 9th meetings. The May comments can't now be accessed as they tell me to use a different type of PDF app. That's to open them. The April comments and questions were sent by me to the correct address at 11:27 a.m., but were then forwarded to PTAC by Andrea Lynch, thank you, at 3:11 p.m. and show that I sent them to KU on Wheels, which is incorrect. So therefore, we got the comments just before the meeting. I don't think anybody ever read in my comments. I'm a senior citizen with some mobility issues. I have only an iPhone, but no computer or printer at home. The minutes of the past 2 meetings of PTAC are incomplete and incorrect and do not accurately or completely report the substance of what transpired. The procedures surrounding this planning and approval process appear to not comply with the City of Lawrence's strategic plan framework. For example, Connected City. I don't think the plan supports making decisions based on the money you can generate, which leaves some folks with less desirable service. In most cases, the stops and the lines are not indicated, which makes planning and commenting difficult. One Lawrence Listen survey would not allow for general comments. You could only comment on a specific route. If you did not know the relevant routes, you couldn't comment on them. I was so frustrated by this that I just commented where I could fit them in. A previous survey was unapologetic that I could only be taken by computer, not phone. Please provide me with the funding sources for this endeavor and contact information in case I pursue making a formal complaint. These comments do not reflect any personal animosity toward the members of PTAC. I have not been treated unkindly, but the system does not seem to work well, and there's a very short amount of time in which to do a lot. I do wonder how we wound up with a group of all men. If written comments are not read by PTAC commissioners, then what is the point of submitting them? They appear to be a mere formality. I'm totally exhausted, frustrated, stressed, and more by the lengthy process involved with PTAC and before. I worked hard on this yesterday, which was difficult due to not having a printer. Unfortunately, I finally had to go to sleep for a few hours, and I've had a very difficult time writing it by the deadline, as I'm experiencing brain collapse that coffee won't cure. I'm sorry about the typeface issue when I copied and pasted an email from Adam near the top of my email. I hope that is readable.
Thank you for your comments, Patricia. PTAC members, does anyone have anything they'd like to respond with at this time? Well, Patricia, I'll tell you, for me, I'm deeply sorry about that you feel like you've been discounted. I can address some of your concerns, but frankly, I think that your concerns merit more of a in-person kind of visit to help you figure out how to navigate the system. If you can you find my email on the website? Please send something to me personally, and we'll arrange something. I don't know what my exact schedule is this week, but I should have some time after my work schedule is done to come meet with you and help you figure out what we can do to make sure that your concerns are heard.
You don't have to come anywhere. I live in an apartment. I don't go out, especially this week. I don't have a car, so I don't.
That's fine. I want to visit. I want to come to you. I want to make this as easy for you as it can be. So I'm happy to go wherever the city bounds Lawrence. I assume you're a Lawrence resident, right?
I am a Lawrence resident, but it's going to be like 99 degrees all week. So, well, anyhow,
we can find some shade. I would like to meet with you in person to help you.
Thank you. But I appreciate that very much. Although I am sorry that I can't. I would actually wanted to say that if these things are true, which I'm not a liar, and it's been a struggle, and I feel like I've hung in there with every step of the way, and for a long time, and I mean, it's just shocking to me that I couldn't get these documents to even know which were the routes I should be pursuing, and that if I'm promised finally that I'm going to get sent a copy, and I don't get it, then what am I to do? And that,
Puts you between a rock and a hard place. So
thank you. Well, I guess I just wanted to influence whether you accept these changes tonight, because this afternoon. Sorry, I still haven't had any more sleep, but I have had more coffee. Okay. Thank you. Well, I feel like this is not personal. This is a bogus, and I don't usually attack people personally, but I really feel like Adam has not been fair with me, and now it's time for everything to get approved, and successfully get me out of the way. Thank you.
thank you, Patricia. Adam, is there anyone else in the City Commission room for public comment? And thanks to the camera swap, I see that there is not. So with that, I'll close public comment this time. Patricia, I would invite you to speak when we get to the route redesign, though, whenever there's a route that comes up for you. Next item on the agenda then is approval of the minutes from the May meeting. So PTAC members, I hope that you've had an opportunity to read through the minutes as reported. And if you have any changes to propose, as always, I will offer 3 opportunities for amendments before we approve by unanimous consent. So first call. Do any members of PTAC have amendments to offer to the minutes from the May meeting? Second call. Do any members have amendments to offer for the minutes from the May meeting? Last call. Do any members have any amendments to offer to the minutes from the May meeting? Okay, hearing none, they're deemed approved by unanimous consent. Okay, first item on the agenda then is the final planned route changes for route redesign, specifically for the routes that will be occurring from August 2022 to January 2023. Adam, I believe you have something that you want to present to us. I know that there is an attachment that is a 114-page PDF of the summary, so it's quite extensive if you haven't looked through it yet, committee members.
Yeah, so Adam Weigel, Transit and Parking Manager. So we do, I know it's quite a long summary. This follows what we've done the last couple of years. We always have some amount of proposed changes. We do a lot of public comment. This year we had about 35 different in-person and virtual events, from proposed final route changes to what is planned. So the document outlines kind of what we put out to the public, what we heard, and how it influenced those final plan changes. So for each particular route, there's kind of those 3 segments, which is what makes it such a large document. There's also quite a bit. One thing we've tried to do the last few years is at the very end of that document is a very large table that characterizes all of the open-ended public comment that we got. And we do make an attempt to try to respond to as many of those as we can, so people can see some follow-up from staff and what people thought about different things. So the content of what is in there is not very dissimilar from what was presented to you all at last month's meeting for final plan changes for both August and January. So I don't plan to walk through every single route, but I do want to call out some of the minor revisions that have happened during that time. We had some discussion, I know, last month about the route that serves North Lawrence, the 9th Street corridor, and the 6th Street corridor. So I want to talk a little about that and some of the additional look that we took in the area around the Merc. So I'll bring that up, and I'll go to those specific items, and then I am happy to talk about any specific area of town or any specific route. But given how we went through everything last month, I won't be going through each of the 19 routes tonight. So with that, let me jump in. And I actually am going to start this document I just put together quickly. So it wasn't on the agenda, but I wanted to talk through it. We did some restructuring of our numbering system for what we're calling different routes to try to maintain and clarify simplicity between routes operated by the University of Kansas and operated by the city. So broadly, I want to highlight that city routes are generally routes 1 through 12 in direct order. We don't have any gaps. And you'll note that route 4, 11, and 12 are the ones we've identified as the coordinated routes. 12 used to be 29. 4 used to be 100 and everything that we talked about in prior redesign. And then there were a couple of other shifts that got things to line up kind of in direct order. But we know we hear from the public that it's useful to understand which routes are funded by KU and thus operate mostly during the fall and spring semester, and which ones people can expect to operate with consistency across the entire year. So I bring this up to highlight this broadly, but before I jump into any specific routes, are there any questions about this general idea? Okay, I'm happy to.
Just one quick thing. The main difference to me seems to be when these routes are operating. Is that correct?
That is, so you in a general sense, you can look at everything routes 1 through 12. The intent is to operate those, and the plan come January is those will operate at a consistent level Monday through Friday and Saturday throughout the entire year. So as an example, routes 11 and 12, which have historically been 11 and 29, are coordinated routes between the city and the university, and they have different levels of service depending on if it's during a fall or spring semester or not. There's been a new effort through this process to not have, from a user experience, from a transit rider perspective, to not have service levels change and have peaks and valleys of service. So people should see routes 1 through 12 all operate at the same levels across the calendar year. And on the back end, the university and the city are figuring out the appropriate levels of funding and investment to put towards those coordinated routes. But what we're trying to avoid is kind of that peak and valley, people who may live along route, what has historically been 29 and will now be 12. And they're just trying to get to the grocery store. And it's a lot easier in September than it is in December. That's what we're trying to make better through this route redesign process. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Can I add in there that some of that variation comes from whether or not it runs on Saturday. And so that will be much more consistent too.
Yeah, that's a good point. The one extra tiny thing I didn't mention is that the coordinated routes that you see in gray, those will have some added evening, kind of later night service from 8 p.m. to 10:30 during fall and spring semester because of KU's priorities when it comes to those coordinated routes. So that's a little extra bump that they get during the semester times, but 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday through Friday, and then also Saturday will be consistent across the year. Okay. I'm happy to come back to this as there are questions. We'll also see some of it in the summary document. So let's jump straight to what merited quite a bit of discussion at last month's meeting. So this first map I'm bringing up is the what was proposed Route 4. And we had a lot of discussion around how this route operates near Merck and possibility of deviation, taking it south to more closely serve that bus shelter that's there. So I show this as a reference, and I'm now going to flip to the planned route. So I want to first talk about kind of what a lot of the discussion was last time. There are a couple other changes I want to discuss, but
Adam, this looks like it's Route 6, not Route 4.
Right. So in that last list I showed you, that was some of the restructuring that happened. This particular route through the proposed stage was called Route 4. Because this operates on the majority of the 6th Street corridor, this was one of those realignments to bring it back to a route name that made a little more sense. So this is a planned Route 6. The number is different from what was proposed. In order, we thought that 6 made a lot more sense since it primarily operates along the 6th Street corridor.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. And I mean, you highlight something that there are going to be some growing pains as we redevelop the entire system and are trying to work with naming conventions and different things. So we're trying to make that as clean as possible and try to make it not only good short-term decisions, but long-term. So we hope that you all bear with us. We hope we can work with the public to make it as simple as for people to follow as possible. So we had some discussion around this idea of westbound trips turning left at Iowa Street off of 9th to serve the Merck bus stop, and then make their loop around Harvard and Centennial to get back. And this document walks through a couple of the reasons why we're not showing that as part of the final plan changes. We did go out there. There are there's some construction activity that's wrapping up soon in that area that has added sidewalk. I know one of the concerns was, so this is the same area. You've got 9th Street, you've got Iowa, here's the Merck. One of the concerns was the accessibility of this area. Both of these stretches of 9th Street on both sides have rebuilt sidewalk. And in the place that we are locating the bus stop that people would use on westbound trips, as part of that project, we've added an accessible boarding pad. So there is new concrete in this area that allows someone to get directly from the curb to the bus in a wheelchair or other mobility device. And then this whole intersection has been rebuilt with new sidewalk and curb ramps, repainted crosswalks, and there's a pedestrian button to get to and from. So as part of us looking at what we need to do in this area, that was part of our thought process. Another just consideration I want to highlight is one of the purposes or outcomes we were looking for of this route was directly connecting people in North Lawrence food desert to affordable grocery options along the 6th Street corridor. So the Merck is an option that folks in North Lawrence have had a direct connection to for a while. And we believe some people use that. We also think that some of the other grocery options along 6th Street can be more affordable for some folks. So we had some concerns about, adding an extra, what's likely to be 4 to 5 minutes to a route that doesn't have a lot of layover time. Essentially slowing people down as they head westward towards maybe more likely grocery options for some of those riders. So that was part of the thought process as well. I mentioned the timing. So this particular route is quite long. It has about 6 minutes of estimated layover. So that layover is used for a couple different reasons. It gives bus operators kind of built-in time to go use the restroom when they're out during the day. It provides time for routes to catch up if they've gotten behind schedule. This particular route will be subject to some of the same challenges of Route 4 in that it crosses a train track, which we sometimes get caught behind and lose some time throughout the day. So that layover time is important for drivers to be able to get back on schedule and for us to not have to send out additional buses for missed trips. So that was just another concern of kind of adding, on westbound trips, an extra 4 or 5 minutes to buses traveling that direction. So those are some of the reasons we do think that it's practical and still a good option for people to use an improved bus stop headed westbound, near Beamers, accessible boarding, new sidewalk to get to the MARC. And for some of those other reasons, did not plan on making that change. I do have some other changes that I want to get to in the area of Wakarusa and out by Free State High, but I might pause here just because I know there was a lot of concern related to the area around the MARC, so I might just check and see if there are additional thoughts and questions about that.
Agreed.
Yeah,
PTAC members, any comments, questions, concerns? I heard Lance chime in.
Yeah, Lance Fay, Vice Chair. So this does address one of my biggest concerns, and it was also brought up in previous public comment, and that'd be the safety of riders and pedestrians around the intersection of 9th and Iowa. The previous route would have forced people to try to cross there. And so if I'm assuming that where you're going to put the bus stop, there's a current bus stop for eastbound on 9th Street, kind of really close to the MARC. It's just about a block to a block and a half west of Iowa, right in that shopping center. I'm assuming that you're going to put the right across the street from that along Centennial Park is where the westbound stop would be.
Correct. And there is a stop there currently. It is without the sidewalk over there. It's not very accessible. It's just a little bit west of Beamers. So we're moving that about 75 feet back to the east towards the intersection of 9th and Iowa and adding an accessible boarding pad. So it should be.
So it'll still be on the west side though.
Correct.
Okay. That's the important thing, as long as it's on the west side. The other thing that I was concerned about on the previous proposal of the route is taking that turn on Iowa and then having to turn left on 6th Street from there, with traffic and where you would put stops. And so this resolves that. Turning on Rockledge is going to be a lot less of a traffic hassle. So
those are good points. Since you brought up Rockledge, I think one of the things we're interested in and excited about are, this alignment has been something that Route 36 has done for a while on the KU side, but with Route 6 coming through here as well, there's a good amount of apartment density near 6th and Rockledge that we think will become, another pretty useful group of riders, or access to a useful route for folks who live in that area. Any other thoughts on that MARC area before I talk about some stuff a little bit west?
Adam, could you jump back to Google Maps? I'm curious, how far is it from where we're planning on putting that new pad to the corner of 9th and Iowa there?
245 feet.
Okay, and they'd still have to cross, and no matter what, if they're coming from that direction, basically.
no.
Yeah, there's a crossing. They have to cross that east leg, or the west leg, I'm sorry, from the north side of 9th Street to the south side of 9th Street. They have to use that pedestrian push button crosswalk.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right.
But do not have to cross Iowa. So that's good.
Not have to cross Iowa.
Okay. It's not necessarily ideal compared to what it is right now. It's definitely a little bit more of a schlep, but it seems a lot more feasible with the improvements that we're putting in at that intersection.
I think it's a good highlight of the compromise. None of our bus routes are perfect. There's a ton of what I like to call like micro planning like this that we have to do and figure out what's the what's the best set of things we can give people on a given route.
The question, so with this route, would we be using one of the larger buses on this route instead of the little cutaways?
Yeah, absolutely. Once this is serving kind of a much larger and different set of users, this will need one of our larger buses for sure.
Much better for ADA accessibility. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the only thing I would want to watch out for in the future is there might be some people who decide that they don't want to walk all the way to the 9th and Iowa intersection to cross 9th Street, and they might decide to cross around either Beamers or Centennial, and that might just be something that we need to keep ranked for. Is this an option to add in another, like at least crosswalk area? And they're not necessarily metered, but something to show that we're responding to the emergent needs of people to cross the street right there, vice going to the intersection.
And we did have some internal discussions about that. I mean, I think we face those challenges all over town. We try to be strategic about where we put things to encourage the behavior that we want to see. But it's also not all us, right? It's we kind of got to respond to the environment that exists. Yep. But it's a good thing to bring up, and we absolutely will be watching this and probably quite a few other things as routes change, and kind of people getting used to their new patterns. Okay. Well, happy to come back to this. I do want to touch on some edits to a little farther west on this route. So we were looking in the area of 6th and Wakarusa. You've got a few different things that we really want to be able to serve in both directions conveniently. And, it played around with, serving things in just one direction versus both. Lots of the 2-direction options, we were missing some pieces. Some key destinations that we wanted to serve. And I think we finally settled on something that gets us to a lot of the ridership generators in this area, and hopefully makes it a little easier for people than what they deal with today on today's Route 6. So I'll mention some of those ridership generators that we're thinking about near 6th and Wakarusa, 6th and Folks, 6th and Congressional. You have some more and more housing, particularly senior housing, developing near 6th and Folks, Overland and Folks in that area. You have Free State High, their stop near Overland and Champion. South of 6th Street, we heard from folks at Rohan Ridge Apartments and a couple other apartments, as well as people who use the Dillons south of 6th Street there. You have Walmart near 6th and Wakarusa, Wakarusa and Overland. And then along Congressional, you've got some apartment complexes just south of 6th that we haven't been able to serve closely before, as well as some pretty dense apartments just west of the Walmart across Congressional Drive. So there's quite a few things going on, all of them that we'd like to serve as directly as possible, and all of them that we'd like to serve in 2 directions so that people can easily, ride to and from these different places. So this is the alignment that we've settled on out in this area. So today's route when it comes off of 6th Street headed westbound, it uses Folks and Overland, Overland all the way out towards Rock Chalk Park. On its way back, it uses Overland until Wakarusa and then hits 6th Street and comes back, creating this one-way loop that kind of serves two groups of people, half as well. So under this new alignment, we're taking things in both directions, hitting all of those destinations that I just talked about. And it does create a couple extra turns, but we are excited at the ability for a lot of these places with some newly added stops to get more convenient service a lot closer to them. So wanted to highlight some of that and see if there were any thoughts or questions.
This is August Ruda. So I really do like the change where you added Congressional Lane. I know, like you said, I know there are a lot of apartments over there, and I do hear a lot of traffic in the area. So I'm really glad that Congressional was used as part of the loop. My only concern is the Champion Lane roundabout. Just it seems very congested, especially during school, and that light is timed to favor east-westbound traffic. Other than that, I do like the new layout.
Yeah, August, that's a good point about the light. I mean, I think we're comfortable with the geometry of the roundabout, I'll say. I mean, traffic and congestion is another thing, but the light we will have to keep our eye on. And we've got a couple places like that as well that we'll just have to monitor and see what sort of impacts we have. I know there's been a lot of efforts recently to alter light timing along some of our major corridors, 6th Street being one of them, to create better flow east-west. So we will just have to keep our eye on what that means as we kind of enter and exit those, those major corridors.
Any other PTAC members have comments, questions, concerns about this part of the route?
Lance Fay, Vice Chair, not so much this part. I think I agree with Mike's concern about kind of back by the Merck area. It might not be a bad idea to look into the possibility of some sort of pedestrian crossing farther back from Iowa. An example I would give is across the street. If you take the route to Checkers, and about a block down from the bus stop is a pedestrian crossing that allows you to get across Louisiana a little more safely and not have to navigate the intersection and the parking lots. And that might be a necessary improvement to make along this route. So I might want to consider that.
Yeah, it's a good comment. I think, yes, certainly something we can talk with our partners in MSO about. I think we'll be challenged a little bit by needing it to be far enough away from Iowa and then to be comfortable with something like that. But a good point and something we can touch base with them on. I know as a general rule, there's a lot of work ahead of us through MSO and through the MPO on identifying crossing improvements and prioritizing those and how we invest in those. So there's a lot of that work that is still to come that I think we've got some info on, but I think there's quite a few crossing concerns throughout the city that probably need some work. All right, I am going to the next one. Sorry for motion sickness here. Okay, jump to routes 1 and 5. And again, just to orient us to what was proposed and, hearing public comment through these interlined routes. No huge changes to this one. The challenge we're looking at as we timed this out, we were being challenged by the amount of time it was taking to run a bus across both of these routes and kind of stay within what we needed for appropriate layover and different things. And so the area we looked at was, the proposed plan was to do the inner line and a turnaround for our buses in a piece of the parking lot for the community shelter. That particular piece adds a little bit of proximity, not a lot, but a little bit of proximity for riders to and from that area, but is kind of an outsized time spend to do that. So as I scroll down to the planned route, we have adjusted the interline location to East Hills. So the business park that both routes will serve. The area that, sorry, I'm gonna zoom in here. The Lawrence Community Shelter and the jail over in this area have a current stop near 25th and Franklin. So that's just one-way service, for buses headed in the downtown direction. So we're looking to maintain that stop and add essentially an eastbound for people that want to connect to Route 5 and anything along the 23rd Street corridor. But this kind of streamlines this area instead of dipping in and out and using a parking lot turnaround, which is also not something we typically want to do, to get on property and do that. That's the change we made for 1 and 5 that you all didn't see last time. So wanted to show that and see if there were any thoughts or questions about that edit.
PTAC members, anybody have comments, questions, concerns? I'll make sure I give Lance enough time because I know he's deep in thought there.
I'm good.
Okay. Anybody else then? I'm satisfied with this, right? It seems like a logical place to make that inner line work.
Okay. I believe that covers any changes that you all did not already see at last month's meeting. So Margaretta, can you think of anything else?
34 and 38.
Oh, thank you. I'm happy to talk through these. Do you want to talk through them?
I can give everybody a little variety.
Yeah.
The university had a proposed change here to the inner line for 34 and 38. And similarly to routes 1 and 5, it wasn't quite working timing wise. And we happen to know that all the twists and turns getting up and down off of the hill around the Kansas Union and GSP Corbin are a pretty significant time in every route we've ever run. And so if you want to scroll down, Adam, what we came up with is to do the inner line on Mississippi Street below the Union instead of above the Union. This will cut out, I think, about 6 turns in each direction and gives us enough time to be able to do the rest of the route within the time that we want it to be to keep 30-minute service. And then in addition, we know that eventually our goal with some construction that's happening on West Campus around 21st and Iowa will be to move the route to Iowa Street instead of Austall through the Schwegler neighborhood. And so in this iteration for the northbound trip, we're going to go ahead and move to Iowa Street after going through 25th and Melrose. That won't need a light to be able to accomplish that. That also gains us a few minutes to make this a more doable route. And then once the light is functional at 21st and Iowa Street, then the route will move off of Austall for the southbound trip as well. I think that basically covers this one.
Yep. Yeah, so, right now, because there's no light here at 21st and Iowa, southbound trips can't come out and make a left onto Iowa. So we still have to go through the Schwegler neighborhood using Osdall to use lights to get back this direction. So this stretch here, as Margaretta said, will become bidirectional as soon as we get the light that helps us make that happen.
And that's supposed to be in about 18 months. It's not soon, but it will be eventual.
Any thoughts or questions on those changes?
I have none unless my fellow PTAC members have questions, comments, or concerns.
I'm happy to go to any routes people want to talk about. Just before I forget this point, wanted to talk about, Patricia brought up a good point about stop locations, and there will be there's a complex process being undergone right now to identify how to appropriately locate new stops or move stops to make all of these changes work in August and then again in January. So we're working on that closely with KU and then also on the city routes to determine the right spots for those. Our intentions for stop placement are consistent with what we've tried to do across the city, where we're, as a general rule, trying not to make anyone walk farther than a couple of blocks, trying to make stops that people would use in both directions, like to and from a location, be relatively close together so that it's simple to understand where you get on and off going in each direction. So I guess just know that we're working on that in in our ride guide production, the printed materials. That's where the specific locations of stops are able to be shown to members of the public. And we're kind of in a constant feedback loop from people giving us insights or thoughts on stops to add, or would be better if you moved it 100 feet to the north. We field that type of stuff all the time and try to evaluate it and make it better if we can. I think one of the areas that just pops to mind that I suppose it's probably been maybe a year or more ago was we added a couple of stops near Aldi out on 31st Street because we had a few different people trying to connect to that grocery store, and we're having a tough time with existing stops in that area. So we do like to hear those recommendations from people. They don't always work exactly just because of turning movements and things, but just wanted to.
Can I add in a little summary of the three main spots for that this time?
Sure, yeah.
With Route 11 and 12 being interlined through campus, we're going to add a couple of stops along Naismith Drive and Sunnyside so that there will be good stop locations going in both directions. And how far back do you have to go?
I think I've made it. I think
there you are. Yeah.
So along here?
Around Capitol Federal Hall. So the section along, yes. So where Sunnyside goes east and west, we currently have stops just on the south side of the street. And we'll add a stop on the north side of the street where there will be sort of centrally located to the crosswalks. And then at the next intersection south from the curve, which is Schwegler Drive next to Capitol Federal Hall, we'll add stops there so that people don't have to travel around the corner to get to their destinations at the Rec Center or Watkins Health Center or Capitol Federal Hall. And then on this combination, there's also going to be a new stop at Bob Billings and Castle in order to have a stop on the east side of the intersection for folks who would be losing the service from Route 30 being cut off there. And we're hoping that having them not need to walk all the way back to the intersection at St. Andrews to board will help mitigate their pain at needing to walk out to the intersection to be able to catch the bus. Those are the two main spots that I can think of that would be of interest.
Thank you, Margaret.
Lance Fay, Vice Chair. Adam, were you going to go through the routes 2 and 3 interline?
Sure, I'm happy to. I should ask everybody to close their eyes while I do this. Okay. So 2 and 3. So I guess I'll go up to the proposed routes before we made our final plans. So there is no change in alignment of these routes. When we proposed these, it was routes 3 and 6. I mentioned we wanted to use route number 6 for a route that primarily operated along 6th Street. So the name of this north-south route that goes from Central Station to LMH out to the industrial area near Lakeview, that alignment is the same, but this map is labeled as 6 and our final plan is labeled as 2. This is part of kind of route naming convention changes. But Lance, would it be helpful just to walk through kind of what each of these routes does? Or do you have a specific question?
The thing I'm trying to figure out on this route is how it travels along 6th Street. It looks as if it starts from downtown, goes up Main, and then goes way up north, then becomes the 2, comes back down by the hospital, then goes back to 6th Street. So you don't really have a continuous route along 6th Street. It's kind of divided up, and I'm just trying to figure that out time-wise.
Right. So yeah, let's talk about the 6th Street corridor as a general rule here. So if you are in the downtown area trying to get to the 6th Street corridor west of Rockledge, you would use Route 6 to do that. You'd travel along the 9th Street corridor, like we just looked at, past the Merck, past Iowa, and out farther along 6th Street. The area of 6th Street between Iowa and downtown is divided between 2 routes. We took some pretty hard looks at kind of exactly what's going on destination-wise in this area. One of the intentions of this is to directly connect people with the hospital from both the downtown transfer area and Central Station. These routes overlap so that we can hit both the Heartland Community Health Center that's moved a little bit to the west, and then Burt Nash and the health department building, which is off of Main. So that's why you see some of that overlap. Let's see, I'm gonna try to annotate a little bit here. I think that might help. So you have, maybe I'll use a color other than, got a lot of residential here. And so when we were looking at what these 2 routes do and what people in this area might be needing to get to, we saw relatively adequate, walking distances to Route 3 that would get people downtown, or Route 6, which gets you to Central Station, or you can go, most places throughout town. The commercial destination wise along this stretch of 6th Street is just interesting. There's quite a bit of fast food, gas station, car wash, liquor store. It's other than a lot of the hospital and medical uses that are north of this area that we tried to make sure routes 2 and 3 connected to, we weren't as sure about, when people are riding from downtown, how many of these destinations, like the commercial ones along 6th Street, are they trying to get to versus the hospital type uses. So that was part of our calculation, I guess, that made us feel more comfortable with this not being a continuous route here, is that if you're trying to get from downtown out to this part of 6th Street, you would use Route 6 to do that directly from downtown. But I might stop talking there and see if I'm off the mark or if you had other types of questions you were.
Yeah, Lance, Vice Chair. So as an experienced bus rider and having lived in that neighborhood, I understand what's being proposed and I understand why it's being set up the way it is. I would be able to understand it and use it. But that's going to be very confusing to somebody that isn't knowledgeable of the system. So that's going to take some that's going to take some explanation to anyone who isn't familiar, both with the bus routes that exist now and how they might change, and that neighborhood. So, I mean, although I understand it, I can see there'd be a lot of people that are just really confused about that.
May I add, I live on Route 3 and also use the bus and communicate with people about how to ride the bus a lot. And my experience through the public engagement process is that I did have conversations at several public outreach events with people who live along here and were really wondering how this would work. And once I explained that there would be the opportunity to transfer at Rockledge and more easily, and that you don't have to ride all the way to the end of the route to make transfers, at least two of those people thought that actually sounded pretty good, because then their trip ends up being shorter instead of longer. And I'm really excited about the bidirectional service. I think that the people who are most likely to be impacted along 6th Street might be our high school riders who are trying to get to Free State by using a public bus route. But I think they're going to figure out the transfer situation very quickly.
Yeah, and Lance, I agree with you that, I mean, I think in this case and in many cases, this is anytime you do major redesign of routes, we're going to need to put as many resources as we can as trying to help people figure out what their new patterns are going to be. I think we, through public engagement and we spent a lot of time on the platform downtown talking with riders. And I think that's where we educated and heard from them a lot, what they expect from this area. I think we talked with a lot of Route 3 riders, a lot of Route 6 riders. So I'm sure we have not reached everyone. I'm sure there will be people who are surprised by change and have to adjust to it. But I think it's our goal to try to set it up for long-term benefit, and then try to be responsive with travel training, with additional engagement once things are close to changing to try to ease those pains. I don't know that we'll be able to avoid it, but we're going to do our best.
Are there any other comments, questions, concerns about this particular route or anything else from PTAC members or other members of the public who I see on the call? I know there are a couple of you out there. If not, then I think the time is ripe to entertain a motion to approve these routes as laid out in this document. If any PTAC members want to offer that as a motion.
This is Al Ackland, the PTAC member. I did have one question on Route 42 proposed map.
Yes. Would you like me to bring that up, Alan?
Yeah, I think was that the only one that didn't have a street background on it? There was one that had just like the highlights or points of interest, and there was no street map behind I think it was 42 proposed.
Well, let me see here. Oh, just like street names, you mean?
Well, no, maybe I thought it was 42. I thought we had one that was just, there was no street backgrounds at all. They were just a series of dots, and it may just be the PDF that I was looking at.
It might be just a load time issue. Mine, the maps show up last when I opened it.
Okay. Yeah, that could have been it. It struck me as the only one that just had highlights and did not have any street background. So, yeah, it could have been just a delay on my machine then. Thank you.
This is August Rudisell. I make a motion to approve the final plan route redesign summary for the 2022 August route change.
Thank you, August. Other PTAC members, is there a second to that motion?
Lance Fay, second.
Okay. We have a motion on the table then. Unless there's any final discussion, I'll give you all one last attempt.
Go to bed.
Okay. Andrea, could you do roll call on vote for approving this motion?
Yes. Lance Fay,
Yes.
Max Schieber,
Yes.
Mike Wazakowski,
Yes.
Alan Ackland,
Yes.
Bill Wilson,
Looks like Bill Wilson's dropped off.
August Rudisell,
Yes.
Freddie Gipp,
Yes.
and Foster Speckinger.
Yes.
That sounds like a unanimous vote in approval, so I believe that carries then. Thank you very much for the good discussion and productive thoughts on how we've adjusted some of these routes to better make them accessible for everyone. That next item on the agenda then is a discussion of fare free pilot policy. Adam, I believe you have a brief document you want to show us to hopefully foster some discussion.
Do. So Adam Weigel, Transit and Parking Manager. Before I jump into this, I know we're coming up on 5:30 here, so I don't want to take too much time, but I did see Foster jump on. Foster, can I ask, Foster is our newly appointed PTAC member with us just this month for the first time. Got appointed after last month's meeting. So I didn't know, Foster, if you could hop on and just introduce yourself in 30 seconds so the group knows who you are and where you come from, all that stuff.
Yeah, hi there, apologies. My name is Foster Spicinger. Originally from North Missouri, lived here in Lawrence for about 2 years. Work at Amazon and KCK. Originally graduated from Truman State University in Northeast Missouri, but since there's limited time, I'll go ahead and pop off there.
All right, thank you. We'll get we'll talk more next month, maybe get the groups more info about you, but thank you. All right. So I had included a document about fare-free pilot policy. So I do think what we're seeking is an action from this group to recommend or not recommend a policy to the City Commission. I've laid out some of the same information that I gave you all back in March when we first talked about fare-free. There was some additional information. We had one committee member who did have some concerns that I thought were good for us to see and talk through as a group. Different concerns and thoughts on some of these things. So I wanted to characterize that in a way that I hope this group could come to some consensus on. So I'm hoping that today we do get to a place where you all can decide whether or not to recommend a 1-year pilot policy that we would then take to City Commission for formal approval or denial. So one of the reasons we're taking it that route, we typically take any purchases to the City Commission that are over $100,000 as part of our purchasing policy. Fare-free policy is a pretty big new concept for us and will be foregoing a fair amount of revenue. So we just want to make sure that that type of policy, even on a temporary 1-year pilot basis, kind of makes its way through the appropriate decision makers. So a couple of things I'll highlight. I put in some of the same information about, what our policy is now, tried to characterize the staff time, the hard dollars we spend on collecting fares, some of the variety of reasons why staff thinks it's a good idea to try a pilot for 1 year. We're in a good financial position to do so after quite a bit of federal formula fund increases, as well as one-time stimulus fund increases. We're at a place where we're trying to recover ridership, and Fare Free has been shown to increase ridership quite a bit in other communities. There's, some of the biggest concerns that bus operators face are at the fare box, people trying to pay appropriate fare and not having fare, having to verify that people are eligible for reduced fare. Most conflict that bus operators deal with is right at the fare box, and just the time it takes to do that for each boarding. So there's a number of reasons why we're interested in trying this. There's also a lot of community interest in it. One concern I wanted to pull out, there was, we get a lot of all of our local funding, aside from fares, we get from a dedicated sales tax. And we use those funds to, as a match, to leverage federal and state formula funds. There was a concern about any changes the legislature might make with the food tax, and does that impact us? Does it not? So I just wanted clarity on that no matter what happens with state food tax, like the sales tax on food, that does not impact our dedicated sales tax that was voted on by referendum in our community. The total sales tax in our community is in the neighborhood of 9%, I believe. And, we have 0.2 cents on that is not impacted, even if some of the other sales taxes, go away or get reduced. So, and to a certain degree, we might actually see our sales tax revenue increase if people are, grocery shopping more. If the food tax gets reduced, we're still getting our piece of that. So I wanted that to have some clarity to it, because I do think that was a good question and our point to bring up. With that, I guess I'm really looking for, I had tried to pull out and highlight some of those kind of those concerns that weren't necessarily raised back in March, and just see if anybody had other concerns, thoughts that we could or should work through as a group. So I'll leave it at that.
PTAC members, I hope you've been able to look through. I did, as Adam noted, there are a handful of spots where he identified we should discuss this concern. I recognize we have about 12 minutes left, so discussing all of them in detail is very difficult. A couple of the aspects that I in particular wanted to hinge on were the equity and ridership recovery discussions. And I also wanted to hit on the last note about the ability to offer fare free and how that would impact paratransit. So unless someone else has a specific issue they want to bring up from this document, those were the three that I thought we should discuss primarily.
And Mike, I don't know if you want to wait till after there's some discussion on PTAC. I do see at least maybe one member of the general public. I don't know if you want to do public comment.
Yes, let's do public comment first. But I only see one person in general on the general. So Michael Allman, I believe that's your hand raised. Go ahead.
Yes, good evening. My name is Michael Allman. I'm with Sustainability Action Network. And because of the time, I'll try to be brief. But basically, Sustainability Action Network, among our various programs, focus on climate emissions relative to transportation, as well as land use and energy production and things like that. But in this case, transportation, I'm kind of surprised if this was developed by the whole board or committee or staff, that whoever didn't put in here something about climate impact, because it's significant and it could help you in selling this, when you get to that point, to the city commission. Transportation energy is something in the neighborhood of 30% of our national energy expenditures, and approximately the same percentage emissions, climate emissions. That's the largest of any sector in our economy. And in that transportation sector, the largest contributor to those emissions are single occupancy vehicles, cars with one driver and nobody else in it. Transit is viewed among multimodal strategies for any community. It's pretty much understood that for multimodal design, transit is the backbone of that system that then includes walking and bicycles, scooters, anything else. They all feed into transit. And that whole multimodal system could potentially offset quite a bit of single occupancy vehicles, motor vehicles. So I encourage you to look into that a little more and include that in your rationale for doing this. All your reasons are great. We support it all, but we encourage you to add that to it. So that's all I need to say, and I commend you. It's really great. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael, fellow Michael. I would just advise in terms of the pollution stuff, we definitely take that seriously. That's a big reason in particular why I personally support our effort to start deploying electric buses to our routes. Looking forward to that coming up in the next couple of months. And we'll definitely keep expanding those. And I agree, the more people that we get to ride buses, vice single occupancy vehicles, more likely we are to reduce the pollution from our transportation sector. So all in favor. I'm not sure that where exactly it would fit into this discussion other than it should have a point somewhere. Thank you, Michael. Is there anyone else? I know there's a couple people that might potentially have comments. Nope. Okay, so the 3 points that I wanted to bring up, the first comment was about the equity of this. In terms of whether riders who are not paying their fares have a sufficient skin in the game in terms of how they're paying for it. My perspective is exactly the one that's outlined in the document, that if we are all paying a sales tax that is intended to fund the operation of our bus system, then everyone who is buying stuff inside the city of Lawrence and paying that tax is throwing their skin into the game and making sure that they are contributing their costs. I imagine that for just about anyone, that sales tax is going to more than add up to the cost of whatever fares they might have contributed for their rides over the course of a year. Is there anyone else who wants to discuss that point in particular?
Lance Fay, Vice Chair, not so much directly on that one, but I did want to hear what the impact would be for the paratransit and Nightline riders, because I do believe that we have some restrictions and requirements where those are concerned.
So I can speak to, Nightline, we don't necessarily have restrictions on that one. That's a general public demand response. Paratransit, the bounds that we have to stay within are that paratransit cannot cost more than twice as much as the base fare for fixed route, because some people need to use paratransit and cannot use fixed route. So if our fixed route fare is zero, our paratransit fare must be zero. So that's the rules we have to follow with that one. We some of the concerns or the unknowns for us are how much that ridership will pick up and our ability to deliver service with that increased ridership. Our current paratransit ridership is still down. We're at about 60% of normal ridership pre-pandemic. So we do have some capacity to bring in more trips on paratransit because we're down so much. So it's going to, I think, be a little bit of time before we would see the type of demand that would outpace our ability to deliver service appropriately on the paratransit side. But to a certain degree, that is just unknown until we give it a try, until we see how many new trips people might take who are already using paratransit if there's no cost. That's kind of one of those things where our position's been, we know there's going to be an increase there also. It's not just going to be on fixed route. We just don't know to what degree. And I think we're prepared to adjust based on what that looks like. The short-term fix would be we get more vehicles out on the street than we've done even pre-pandemic, and we accommodate what we need to get people where they need to go. We've got the funds through the year 2023 to make that happen. And then we could decide towards the end of that year, is our new paratransit trips so high and so overwhelming that we can't afford all the new resources to keep that up indefinitely. That's an unknown. I think that we are kind of prepared to come back to the table if it's an issue.
Okay. And so the night line and then would stay at its current fare. And then what about the Sunday on demand service? Would that be similar to Nightline or similar to the rest of the weekday service?
So I apologize, I misunderstood the question. So our intent is to go fare free across our services. So fixed route, paratransit, Nightline, and the new microtransit. It's our intent to be fare free in all of those areas. The bulk of our cost for any one of those services is a driver in the seat. So if I have somebody driving a fixed route for an hour or a microtransit or a Nightline for an hour, the cost of that is about the same. So it's we're not really confident that if we were to keep any one of those services a paid service, that would be an equitable thing to do for people using them. So it's our intent to go fare free across the system for a full year, and then have that be a learning period to determine if there's different complexity that we would want to bring back. One of the challenges is we don't gain any of the efficiencies of staff time and the hard costs for printing passes and Brink's armored truck service. We don't gain any of those efficiencies, or most of them, unless all fares go away. If some fares remain, we have all this processing and admin work that still has to happen.
Thank you for that discussion. Unfortunately, we now have 1 minute left, and I do not think that's appropriate to continue discussing this further. I'd just like to add in before we break on that, I do still want to address the ridership recovery issue, because to me, more than equity or anything else, that seems to be a linchpin in terms of what economically is the benefit or the hit to the city's budget from foregoing fares. That, if we end up foregoing fares, which is great, and we drive demand through the roof, if we have to put a bunch of new buses on the route, we need to make sure that we're covering that funding in some way. But we do not have time to fully address that. So I would like to table this until next month's discussion.
Mike, could I just ask, if I see a number of members still with us, is it feasible for us to extend a little bit to continue this, or do we need to?
I can.
In that situation, I can stay around for another probably 10 minutes or so. Any other PTAC members, if we need to sign off, we need at least 5 to continue to do official business.
This is Al Ackman, PTAC member. I'm signing off at 5:30.
Okay, that would take us down to 5. Foster, August, Max, Freddie, are you available to stick around a little bit longer?
I'm good to stay.
Okay,
I'm available.
Okay. Okay, I think that's enough then, Adam. We can keep going for a little bit further.
I would appreciate it. Yeah.
Okay. Last, jump back in terms of ridership recovery. I'm not sure what the appropriate balance is in terms of trying to promote more rides from people who are already active riders and trying to promote people who are not active riders to start using the bus system on at least an infrequent basis. And I wish I had an idea in terms of, is going fare free going to primarily juice the people who already ride to do more, or is it going to actually induce people to take rides when they wouldn't otherwise? So I'd like to open up the floor to discussing that point. I saw Margreta was raising your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, I wonder if my perspective of when KU went fare free might be somewhat informative. I realize that it's not quite the same since we have a sort of captive audience on campus, but our predictions for increased ridership was at the time about 20%, and we experienced an increase of close to 100%. Of course, this is before the pandemic, and in no way a similar time of people riding transit, because that was 2008. But the capacity on all of our buses was enough that we were able to absorb the majority of that within our existing service. And I think that it really is something where you'll be able to see immediately where this is an advantage for people, and immediately where some things shift around. And this is how KU's routes get updated every year a little bit, is to reflect that ridership pattern. And we collect so much data these days on buses compared to what we did in 2008 that it will be there will be a lot of data for staff to use to really analyze that we're putting the resources exactly where it needs to go. And I work with Adam and all of his staff on this quite a bit throughout our daily coordination efforts, and it's a significant amount of time that I spend looking at it for KU. And I'm rambling now, I'm sorry. My main point was, I think that you collect enough data that you will be able to closely monitor the situation and truly react as you need to.
Thank you, Margreta.
Lance, Vice Chair. I think that you probably will not see as much of an increase on the city routes as you did on the KU routes, but there will be an increase. Also, the city routes, I think, are there's still capacity on the buses for more riders in most situations, particularly if we're using more of the larger buses and fewer of the cutaways. And I think also with all the changes coming up in the routes, this is a great time to go ahead and have fare free. So from a rider's perspective, I think we have the capacity to deal with it and, can analyze data as it comes in. I'm not concerned about us being overwhelmed, especially not right away. I imagine if you get halfway through the year, we can revisit some other options, but I don't see a situation where we get overwhelmed immediately by this at all.
Thank you, Lance. Any other PTAC members who haven't chimed in have anything they want to add in here? Okay, well, I'll tell you, my personal leaning is we should support this policy and send it to the City Commission for approval. So unless someone would like to propose the alternate, which is to continue the existing fare policy, I would definitely welcome a motion right now to recommend the fare-free pilot be started at the beginning of 2023.
Lance Fay, I make a motion for recommend fare-free.
Thank you, Lance. Is there a second?
I second it.
Thank you, August. We have a motion and a second. Given we've provided sufficient opportunity, I think, to discuss, unless someone has last comments. Okay, Andrea, could you please go through roll call and tally up votes, please?
Yes. Lance Fay.
Yes.
Max Schieber.
Yes.
Mike Wazakowski.
Yes.
Alan Ackland just hopped off. Bill Wilson.
Not present right now.
August Rudisell.
Yes.
Freddie Gipp.
Yes.
And Foster Spicinger.
Yes.
That's a unanimous vote. Thank you, everyone, for that. Adam, just keep us in the loop when that's going to go to the commission, just in case we'd like to speak in favor of it. I can't imagine this is going to be something that fits on the consent agenda, but see what happens. That then we just have clean up loose ends. Adam, I believe you wanted to mention something about the June 25th event.
Yes, I'll be sending out, we'll have a press release going out either today or tomorrow if it hasn't already gone out related to details for unveiling electric buses. We're going to have an event downtown in front of the library on June 25th. There will be a how-to festival going on that the library is hosting out on the library lawn. So we'll be kind of adjacent to that out on Vermont Street. We'll speak a little bit. We'll have some cookies, refreshments. We'll speak a little bit about project partners, just honoring all the different groups of people who helped with this project. And then we'll be able to take a few bus rides around. So hope everybody can make it. Like I said, I'll send out more details to this whole group. It'll be June 25th, 10 a.m. to noon, right in front of the library downtown. So hope to see you there.
Thank you, Adam. I believe I will not be able to attend. Unfortunately, I need to go up and visit my mom. It's been about a year since I've been able to see her, and this is one of the few times that it's going to work out for her. So, but I can provide written comment if someone would like to advise, or Lance, I'm sure that you would be welcome to speak at this as well for PTAC. Lastly, as always, if you have any agenda items or concerns about public transit that you'd like us to address in a future meeting, please email Adam, Lance, or myself, and we will discuss that the next time that we set our agenda for meetings. And we'd love to take your input because there's only so much we can do to guide you guys. We need help in terms of what you guys want the city's public transit system to look like as well. So with that, our next meeting will be on July 11th. Same bat time, same bat channel. I assume since we're on Zoom now, we'll remain on Zoom for the foreseeable future. If not, we will figure out where we're going to meet in person. Yeah. Any last remarks, Adam or Lance?
Nope, nothing else for me. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much for your time. We're adjourned. Have a great night.